Well, as we've been reporting, there have been calls for calm as violence escalates in the occupied West Bank. 63 Palestinians and 13 Israelis have been killed in the violence during the first 2 months of the year. And the fighting this week comes despite top Israeli and Palestinian officials meeting to try to discuss ways of lowering tensions. The executive director of the New Israel Fund in Australia, Liam Getreu, is with us. Liam, nice to have you on. You know, as we've just reported, there's awful violence happening on both sides, attacks on both sides. It's very, very fraught. Can you give us a sense of why do you think, you know, at the start of this new year, this sort of situation has escalated?
Well, the main thing that continues to be true and has been continuous now for more than 55 years is Israel's occupation of the West Bank, right? As long as neither Israelis or Palestinians have the hope to break free from this paradigm, we're going to continue to see these upsurges in violence. There's just no way around it. You can't occupy 2.5 million people, deny them basic civil and human rights, deny them the ability to vote for the government that controls their lives, and expect there to be complete stability and safety and security. It's just not possible. And this Israeli government, having been elected just a few months ago now, is probably the most right-wing in Israel's history. Benjamin Netanyahu is once again the prime minister. His agenda is not to de-escalate. His agenda is not to try and seek out partnership with Palestinians and to try and resolve the crisis. His government actually has the opposite mandate. It's a mandate of annexation. It's a mandate of continued settlement growth. And these are the things that will continue to bubble up and create this lack of stability and this horrendous violence that we're seeing on the ground.
Yeah, and it's such a good point you make, Liam, because it seems as if since this new government came into force that it has escalated. Do you think that closing a blind eye that Netanyahu is doing is to appease his very far right-wing partners in this coalition?
Well, I think we shouldn't give all of the credit to Netanyahu for this particular policy. This has been going on for a long time now. There was a brief year that we had last year where mostly Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid were also prime minister. Naftali Bennett, incidentally, is in Australia right now on a speaking tour. But they had the same policy of trying to maintain the status quo, trying to just live with the arrangement and not seek out radical changes. But Netanyahu is, like you said, a victim of his coalition. He usually likes to be in the center of his coalition. This time he's on the far left of his coalition. These are people who are some of the most dangerous people that Israeli politics has ever seen. People who have been, outwardly calling for ethnic cleansing and removal of Palestinians. The finance minister, who is now also in charge of the civil administration over the West Bank, calls himself a proud homophobe, right? These are not people who we can look to and say this is a well-functioning liberal democracy. And when you add in the rest of Netanyahu's agenda internally into Israel, you have even more problems. There are huge protests against his government that something like 60% of Israelis are opposing his main platform now. So this is definitely at the surface.
Yes, a lot of tension there. So when we hear about these talks between both sides sitting down trying to de-escalate, do you think that is just a furphy, that there is no real intention on the Israeli side to further this? And of course, there's been a lot of lack of leadership on the Palestinian side too.
Completely, right? No one is immune from criticism in this debate. And I would say that any time that Israelis and Palestinians, and this was done also with the Jordanians and others, sit down to have a discussion about the future of the region, that's good. That's positive. That should absolutely be encouraged. But again, like I said, Netanyahu does not have a mandate to progress these talks forward. The Jordanians came out soon after that meeting and said, we have a commitment of a 4 to 6 month freeze of settlements. And Netanyahu had to come out minutes later and say, no, I didn't promise any of that. Ignore what the Jordanians are saying. Again, his mandate is the opposite. His mandate is for more settlements. They just authorize retroactively, I think about 10 settlements, huge numbers of settlement outposts, about 10,000 new buildings in the West Bank. These are settlements that even the Israeli government acknowledges are illegal and will retroactively authorize in order to progress this campaign. The world is committed to a two-state outcome, right? We all want to see an Israeli and Palestinian state living side by side. We should be encouraging these talks, but it will also take creativity from major powers like the United States, but also middle powers like Australia, to think about how it can not only contribute to lowering the tensions, but also making sure that the two-state outcome is not pushed off the table by the Israeli government and its continued efforts to seek out annexation.
Yes, and Joe Biden has made it very clear where he stands on this violence. But I guess when you think back to Trump and Netanyahu, they had a very different relationship. It seems like the US-Israeli relationship couldn't have been further apart now. It, is very far apart at the moment.
It absolutely is. I think there is still, I would like to hope, a set of shared values between countries like America and Israel and Australia and others, that there is a shared liberal democratic framework. The problem is that, A, Netanyahu is doing the best he can to undermine this with the judicial reforms he's pushing forward, but also, again, his very right-wing coalition inciting and antagonizing. There was the most recent attacks. There was a murder of 2 Israeli boys, brothers in the West Bank on Saturday, and the day after, an attack by Israeli settlers on a Palestinian village that even the Israeli press, right-wing Israeli press, are calling a pogrom, which for anyone who knows anything about Jewish history will hark back to some of the darkest days that our people experienced. And so to be saying that this is the kind of activity that is being sparked by this government, it's no wonder that Joe Biden is not at all happy with the Israeli administration, and neither should the Australian and other governments be as well.
It'll be interesting to see how they can perhaps, as you say, make some efforts to assist in some way. Liam, I really appreciate your analysis. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bev. Appreciate it.